In third grade, my teacher assigned us a creative writing, and my mom helped me with it. And then a few years later, my mom ended up getting published. And I had enjoyed writing so much that I just wanted to join her.
Well, in about the 4th or 5th grade, I started reading a lot, including Rick Riordan, J.K. Rowling, just great books. And that inspired me. Before that, I hadn't been good at writing essays or anything like that, but I just started to get better after that point. It was that's my inspiration.
I like writing because I can get to tell my perspective on things that I like to do, and write books novels or picture books or whatever that I would like to have, share to the world.
I remember, it's very connected for me. I remember when I was younger, my father was reading Aragon and it had a dragon on the front. And I was too young to be able to read it. So I made it my goal to read Aragon, and I remember finishing it and being like, I want to make that. And I had a passion for that for a long time. And then after a while, I just didn't like what I was writing, and then I ran into Brandon Sanderson. And I read Mistborn, which I was like, this is on par with my favorite author, who's John Flanagan, author of Ranger's Apprentice. And then I read Way of Kings, which is his epic fantasy, and I fell in love with that. And I was like, no, I've got to write again. And then since then, I've written quite a bit.
Probably my very active imagination and my older brother, who was trying to write.
Well, when I was in kindergarten, I started kind of writing my own books, and my mom would help me write them, and I would kind of illustrate them. And I think writing just kind of helped me kind of get some of my feelings out, my emotions and such. And I loved reading so much, I wanted to create my own stories. And I've just been writing ever since, just trying to come up with new, interesting, intriguing, real characters and creating new stories for people to enjoy.
Being told that I couldn't write by a teacher. She was kind of destructive. She told me that if I tried to write, I wouldn't go anywhere.
I would have to say it's the joy of being able to create something that is both entertaining and meaningful, and also being able and experiencing this, with reading other stories, and there's something very powerful about stories that I love.
I've read a bunch of books, Wonder has made me passionate about writing, and as well as Tuck Everlasting or The Hunger Games. That just gave me the passion to write.
Oh, I would have to say there's this really great website called narrativefirst.com. I've been subscribed to it for a few years. I love it, and I've also read some great books about writing that talk about all sorts of topics from plot to point of view, and they've all been very helpful.
There was a book that I discovered in 6th grade. It's called Spilling Ink by Ann Mazer and Ellen Potter. And I have some of the pages doggy folded and underlined and post-it notes and all of it. It really helped me understand the craft of writing and how to better get your ideas on paper, and kind of how to just make your writing better and get your ideas more fully developed. And it's really helped me, along with many teachers. I've taken a couple of classes at the high school that have helped me with writing as well. So,
I was on the Ink and Quills email list for a while, and that helped a little bit. Rereading my notes from TABC helps, and then it's just occasionally I'll stumble across internet articles or books in the library about how to edit and grammatical stuff, because I think of that.
These books have greatly inspired me. More recently, I've read The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. Those were fantastic books, and it was shocking he wrote them in high school.
Writing Magic by Gail Carson Levine.
Especially helped. So things that especially help my writing is whenever I find something new. Like I said, Brandon Sanderson, I think, is a major one because he was my first high epic fantasy. Ranger's Apprentice, another big one for me, was because it was fantasy that was realistic to a degree. It takes place in a medieval world, but it doesn't have as much magic, and spellcasting has a lot of tactics. Reading, for my AP Lit class, we read a book called The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, and that one was just so different for me. And it's realistic fiction, but just the things that it has within it, and it has a lot of references to science fiction and fantasy, and it's presented, it has footnotes that it uses, and instead of having them be all scientific and stuff, it has like jokes in the footnotes. So it mimics the scholarly form of footnotes and writing, but it isn't quite. And so just whenever I find something new, it's going to expand my view of writing.
Well, it's really not so much what I read, but like coming to conferences like this and getting advice from other authors definitely helps a lot. So, I mean, asking for actual advice is probably my best source.
Seeing a story all the way through is definitely the hardest. I can come up with story ideas relatively quickly, and I have tons of story ideas on my phone, and I have tons of scenes written down in my computer. I just don't have them very well developed past the first chapter or something, so.
Being stumped or just running out of ideas?
Keeping the story flowing and keeping a solid storyline, because I will write and I will have ideas, I will get it out on the page, and then the next time I sit down to write, I made a major plot twist that changes everything, and I have to figure out how the heck to foreshadow that without completely giving it away.
Writer's block. Yep. Definitely.
The hardest thing about writing is probably keeping up with it. I currently have so many different things that I want to write and so many different things that I've started. And it's really hard for me to sit down and say, this is what I need to write. Because I have projects that have been unfinished that still would make good stories from when I was like 12, which was years ago. And just creating these stories and focusing on one, because there's so many different stories to tell.
The hardest thing about writing is probably when I get stumped on what to write. Like I'm in the middle of a sentence and then what should I write next?
Ooh, I'd have to say probably description, or maybe showing instead of telling.
I struggle a lot with voice and not doing too much telling, more showing. I have the perfect vision in my head, but I can't always make it come out on paper.
That if you feel like you should throw your laptop out the window, you're normal.
That there's such a thing as too much outlining or not outlining enough. There's a balance.
I wish I knew more about showing instead of telling and how voice works, because even now I'm starting to figure it out, and that's definitely a huge part, dialogue and voice.
This one might sound kind of mean, but how smart people are. Because you see all kinds of stories about people doing stupid things, and it kind of makes you think, oh, people aren't that smart. And I wrote a lot of characters that were horrible, horrible characters because they weren't smart. And everyone has stupid moments. Like I can think of multiple ones in my life that if someone heard just that story about me, they'd think that I was not smart. But learning that everyone was smart and being able to create characters that were smart and being able to take that further, it's sometimes really hard to create characters who react the right way. It's like your hero's really smart and comes up with a plan, but then the villain doesn't. And just trying to make characters smart is hard.
Probably that I should actually develop things first and to use my own original ideas, because my first two books that I remember, one was a Magic Tree House spin-off that was my imaginary friend and her little brother in a magic library. And then the other one was a cats versus dogs shapeshifter that, it made no sense.
I wish I knew how to transition more smoothly, how to include the senses better. I'm not a great writer, but many of these meetings have said that you don't start off being great, you start off kind of down low and then you get better.
I wish I kind of knew some of the more resources that are ready for you. I mean, there's so many books that you can read and so many people that you can talk to if you're outgoing enough. And I wish that I was more better about writing in my journal, because that just writing every day about your life, even if nobody reads it ever, is still very helpful and kind of gets you learning early on how to create a story.
I wish that I knew that before I started on how to conclude like senses and describe what it smelled like or felt like or looked like.
Just keep writing and don't look back at old writing. I mean, you just keep writing and rewriting and rewriting, and it will take years and years and years sometimes, and other times it will come really, really quickly and you can pull something out of thin air.
So the biggest advice I could give is to come to things like Teen Author Boot Camp, or to apply for these writing contests like Owl Hollow Press created, and just look and research for any writing contests that they have. Here in Utah, there's tons that you can participate in, and just really kind of create those ideas and actually like have them down on paper and submit them to people for other people to read. I'm where I am today right now because I've submitted to writing contests through Utah Valley University and through Teen Author Boot Camp, and I've been coming to Teen Author Boot Camp for the last 4 years, and I've learned so much every year from all these different authors who come all over, and it's also been very helpful to have other friends who love writing and to take classes at your school, if you can, that help with creative writing and novel writing. And just really try and always be on the lookout for new story ideas, whether it's eavesdropping on a stranger or looking for interesting characters in the crowd and writing down what you see. Always write down what you think or feel, or just anything in the world that might inspire you. And you'll look back months, years later and be grateful that you have all of these things written down that you can use later in your life for a story idea if you ever want to write a book.
Voice, the idea of voice and how it's something that's very unique to you. So, and ideas are very important, but your own voice is uniquely you. When you're writing, you want to have your passion in it and to make it so it's enjoyable for your readers, but also make sure that you have something meaningful to say, because that will help cement the story in the minds and the hearts of the people who read it.
Don't let anyone tell you can't write.
I've had such a blast. Good. Just like everything, I'm like, why have I not known this for the past 6 years?
I love Teen Author Boot Camp.